All right. Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to another future-focused weekly update. I'm your host, Christopher Lind, and if I am doing my job well, hopefully I am keeping you 10 steps ahead of what is happening at the intersection of business, tech, and the human experience. I have been off for a little bit, so it's good to get back. I hope you had a great 4th if you're celebrating that here in the U.S., and if not, I hope your July's off to a strong start. So I'm coming back. I've got some fairly big updates that I want to go through. But before I do, I just want to thank all of you who follow along, reach out, share messages, share updates. I actually have one. David, I'm going to cover your update in this one. So thanks for sending along. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. But thank you for that. Please share it if you find this helpful. Share it with your friends. Tell other people about it. And like, subscribe, leave a rating, all that good stuff just to help continue expanding the reach. Let me give you a quick rundown of the 3 that I for sure am going to cover, 4 depending on timing. So first, I want to talk about Amazon's forced relocation that they're doing and just share some thoughts and reflections on that. I think it's an extreme example, but we'll get into that. I also did say a couple weeks ago, I wanted to spend a little bit more time digging into Microsoft's Work Trend Index, annual Work Trend Index. So I'm going to talk about some of my biggest takeaways from digging deeper into that. Then I also want to talk about some of the buzz flying around GPT 5.0 and what that might mean. And are we at the Singularity event and all this other good stuff? David, this comes from the video that you shared with me. And so I'll give some reactions, thoughts, reflections on where that's at. And then finally, if I have time, so this is the maybe, if I have time, I will get to a rising trend I'm seeing. It was inspired by an article I read from Futurism about a couples retreat for couples that are human AI couples and how that went off the rails, and really less talking specifically about that retreat and more some of the things that I'm seeing related to that. So with that, let's get into it. If you did not see this came out at the end of June, but Amazon took a really bold step. And I don't say, I guess I don't even know that I like the word bold, because bold can be a really positive thing. Reckless. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Amazon made a reckless move where they're telling thousands of employees that they need to move and relocate to one of its main hubs or quit with no severance, no anything. They just need to quit. And they're being given 30 days to do that. Now, this isn't something that just came out of left field. They have been working for over a year to try and get people to move closer to the big hubs. And, you know, for all the reasons we hear whenever anybody says anything about getting people back in the office, for collaboration, team, blah, 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 all that other good stuff that comes out. But this is a pretty harsh one in that they not only have 30 days to decide, but then they have 60 days after that to start the relocation process or leave. Now, one thing that would be really interesting, and I'm going to be keeping close tabs on, is I'm not exactly sure. Now, depending on how your employment agreement is written, they may be able to enforce this. They may not. And I think that's something that if you're someone who is, you know, in a situation like this, whether you're at Amazon or somewhere else, if you're an employee that suddenly finds yourself faced with a very dramatic shift like this, it is worth looking into the employment agreement you signed and your job description, because you do have rights as an employee. And there are certain things that companies can threaten that they can't necessarily follow through on, you know, and this to me is one that's a little bit of a gray area. To be clear, I'm going to add the big, you know, warning so I don't end up getting in trouble for this. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not offering legal advice. Do not say Christopher told me, therefore that is not what I'm doing. However, I've been in the HR space enough to know how some of these things are written, that there are times companies make very big, sweeping, bold statements in an effort to freak people out, knowing that the majority of people aren't really going to push too hard. They're going to cave on some of these things. And so because if you think about it, forcing someone to relocate, if you've hired them into a certain position and their job has not distinctly changed, and you're not offering full benefits to move them and all these other things. This one to me, again, I'm not a lawyer, but this one feels shakier than most things. This one feels extremely shaky that a company would be able to mandate you to move your entire livelihood to a location with, from what I can tell, no offer of support to do that. And then if you don't, you just have to quit and receive no severance. It just doesn't. So if you are one of these Amazon employees, this would be an area I would go spend a couple $100 and talk to an employment attorney about this one before you do anything drastic. Because I do know that a lot of times these moves are made, and I think they've even come out since saying this is an effort to try and reduce headcount. A lot of times these moves are designed to get people to quit so they don't have to let them go. So they don't actually have to follow through with this. And so, they're banking on that. So it's worth it at this point, if you do find yourself in the situation, to spend a couple $100 and to go talk to an employment attorney and say, hey, does my employment agreement, and here's the circumstance, is this even something they can do? Because there is a possibility, I'm not even going to weigh in on how much that possibility is, that this may not even be legal for them to do. And so you may actually, depending on what your employer or an attorney says, you may be able to just say, yeah, I'm not playing ball. Now, granted, here's my word of caution if you decide to go that route, okay? Companies are often at-will employers, depending on the state you're in, depending on all this other stuff. The U.S. has some, unique circumstances that I don't think are always in the best interest of employees. We won't get into that because I don't think that solution is necessarily what we see elsewhere. But anyway, you could win this fight and still lose, I guess, is my warning. You could say, yeah, I talked to a lawyer. You can't do this to me. So I'm not going to quit and I'm not going to move. There may be a world where you're able to do that. Again, don't say Christopher told me to. Legally, you may get advice that you are in a position to do that. What I will tell you as a senior business leader is that may still lead to you losing in the end. And what I mean by that is companies can always find reasons to get rid of you. They can. You can quickly find yourself in a situation. Now, granted, if you're really good at it and you are prepared for it, you may be able to show, hey, this is retaliation. This is in response to this. This is a hostile work environment. There's ways that you can still fight them. But a lot of times what I find is the fight a lot of times doesn't end up being worth it in the end. I've seen people spend way more money in legal efforts trying to fight a company, and then they get, a severance at the end that's worth less than they spent on it. So you got to play your cards carefully. So don't think just because I'm saying, there's certain situations like this that a company may not be able to do what they're saying they're going to do as a scare tactic, that you can then just go, I'm not going to participate. And then you're somehow immune and the hero of the story. You may still find yourself in a losing situation, which is why if you're going to make a bold statement like that, let's say you get some legal advice on this, they say they cannot do this to you. I would still strongly encourage you to figure out, well, then what is your play? And your play may be, no, I'm going to either focus on, really my advice normally to people is if you were really going to take a stand, I would make it on taking a stand on getting a severance and finding another job, or rushing to find another job and just get out of there, because is that really a place you want to be? But I've seen people go down this path and they think they've won, only to find themselves exited out of the organization for bad performance shortly thereafter. And now they have a black stain on their employment record when it really wasn't their fault. So all that to say, if you're an employee, one, talk to an employment attorney before you do anything, crazy. Don't panic though, because things like this are often scare tactics. They've been trying for a year. Clearly, people are going, yeah, we're not going to move. So they're trying to up the pressure and going, yes, you will. You have 30 days and then 60 days after you have to do it, because they know there might be people that'll go, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And then they'll kick it down the road 2-3 years, not actually move. So they're trying to play hardball here. That's what Amazon's doing. They're trying to play hardball and say 30 days to decide. If you say no, you have to quit without a severance. If you say yes, you have 60 days to get the process started, or you're gone. That's a very firm stance to take that I don't know that they have a whole lot of ground to stand on. So if something like that happens, don't freak out. If you are unsure or don't feel confident about the path you want to go, talk to an employment attorney. It's worth a couple $100 to do it. But you also I would also encourage you to have a really candid conversation depending on the relationship you have with your boss. You may be able to have a candid conversation and say, listen, where are we at with this? Because moving is not in the cards for me, because from what I can tell from this, they're also not offering raises. So if you're living in a lower cost area, suddenly you're going to move to headquarters, which Amazon's headquarters ain't cheap where they are. This just isn't a win situation for the employees, which is what they're trying to get people to quit. But you can have an honest conversation with your boss and say, here's where I'm at. I don't think this is going to work. I'm weighing my options, and you can let them know. And I'm exploring with an attorney whether or not it's even legal for them to do this to me. But I would rather talk this through like adults and see if we can come up with some sort of, is there a different role that I can take? Is there a separation agreement we can mutually agree upon? Is there a way we can handle this like adults? And you may realize you have a lot more negotiating power than you think if you actually approach it wisely. But the biggest thing is be calm. If you go in freaking out saying, you can't do this to me, or, you just freak out and quit because you're like, I'm not going to put up with this. That's the worst thing you can do. The best thing you can do is take a deep breath, calm down, think through what your possible options are. What do you really want? Do you actually want to stay with the company? Do you want to leave? Think through some of these things so you know what you're going for. So as you engage in the dialogue, whether it's with an attorney, whether it's with the company, you know what you're shooting for. If you want a separation agreement, how much severance would you feel is reasonable for the time you've committed there? What would you like to see from that? How would you like that exit to go down? Think about things more than just the money. Think about making sure that it's notated that you are eligible for rehire, that they will consider you for there's other things that you can think through. And it's just better when these things pop up to slow down and focus than fly into panic mode. Because in many ways, that's what they're banking on. They're banking on people flying into panic mode, making irrational decisions, either doing something that allows them to get fired, or making a rash decision and quitting. And, rather than doing all the things I just told you to do. Okay, the other piece, though, is I want to speak to the companies and the senior leaders, because this is becoming more and more of a problem. And I'm seeing it left and right as companies are treating people just like they're less than human. I mean, this is one of the biggest life changes in a person's life. Like uprooting and changing your entire family's location is a major shift. To force that on to employees in the name of what? Collaboration, team dynamics, these vague platitudes, innovation. And I get it's not really about that. You just want to downsize. But come on. If you're a senior leader, if you're the company, you're in the power position, you have a responsibility to be the one who's being the big person here, to treat people with respect. You know what? If you're trying to downsize, then openly, don't be a coward. Acknowledge that is what we're trying to do, and then we're going to do it the right way. We're going to approach this. We're going to, try and handle it as best we can and be the responsible adult and act like an adult, a mature adult, about what you're trying to do. This to me is middle school antics. It's like the bully on the playground who, I'm going to steal your lunch money. I'm going to bully you into a corner till you finally give me your lunch money. Like, really? Is that what we've come to now? One of the biggest companies in the world, one of the most profitable, one of the most successful companies in the world is bullying its employees into moving or quitting for zero documentable, measurable performance reasons. That's just, honestly, it's pathetic. It's honestly pathetic in my book. And I think we can do so much better as leaders, as organizations, to treat people with the dignity, the respect that they deserve. These people that have worked for you have committed time, energy, their mental capacity, like their lives to you. And the thank you they get is move or you're gone. That's just crappy. And this kind of stuff is going to stick with you. And you think we're Amazon, we're going to get away with it. But these kinds of things stick with you and they change the culture. They destroy the internal dynamics. It creates a real tailspin effect that it's costing you. I promise, Amazon, this is going to cost you far more than whatever you're saving. I've gone through this enough with organizations where they go through these cost exercises. And when you do the full math on the impact to your organization, especially doing something as ridiculous and reckless like this, I promise you the math is not in your favor. So it's just not. You're wasting money on this. And if you're doing that, to flex, to feel better about yourself, then I, will not be sad when I see you take a hit. If it's truly because you don't know how to do better, get some help. Call me. I'll come help you think of a better way to do it than exploiting your people like this. This is, in my opinion, this one's disgusting. It's just disgusting. And we can do better than this. And what I would also say is to any companies, because this is always my big concern when I see the big players do this. I haven't seen any more pulling this kind of shenanigans, probably because I think even some of the companies who are all for the RTO thing looked at this and went, whoa, Amazon. I mean, I've talked to some senior leaders at some companies who are pretty hardcore in the RTO thing. And even they've said that was stupid on their part. But that doesn't mean just because that's the attitude now that it'll stick. What I tragically see with a lot of these things is a big company like Amazon will do it and it'll start a domino effect. And while I haven't seen that with this one yet, and the overall temperature on it doesn't seem to be approval, it can. And so if you're a company thinking about taking a move like this, or maybe not even something as extreme, maybe you're not thinking about forcing people to move on their own dime with 30 days notice, but maybe you're thinking of doing some other thing. I'm telling you that it is not in your favor. Even if the numbers in the short term look like it's a win for you, it is a loss. And I've been through this more times than people will in many lifetimes to tell you, you are losing. You are losing and it's not worth it. Handle it like mature adults. Figure out why you're doing what you're doing. Be open in your communication. Treat people with dignity and respect. Help them through the process. Does it mean it's going to go perfectly? No. There's still going to be people who are going to be mad no matter what you do. There's still going to be people who, you could offer them $100 and they're going to be mad that you didn't offer them $520s. That's still going to happen. But then those examples are not stains on your shirt. That's those individuals who choose to respond that way. When you pull nonsense like this is your lunch dumped all over your shirt. And there's no going, oh, well, we were just doing the best. You can't cover this up. And I get this as an extreme example, but do the right thing. And not just because it's the right thing. The performance numbers support it, that it is in your favor in the long run. Okay. So again, hopefully that's helpful, whether you're an individual. If you're an individual, quick recap, slow down, get some outside perspective, think through what you really want out of this, and then proceed with the with the maturity that the company is not. Okay. And if you're a company, do the right thing because it is in your favor in the long run, even if it doesn't look like it on paper or in the short term. It's better for you financially. It's better for you from a performance standpoint. It's better for you from an employee's standpoint and just reputational standpoint. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the Microsoft Work Trend Index annual report. This is one I mentioned before. A couple weeks ago, I was talking about agent bosses. This is kind of the big move. Everybody's going to be an agent boss in 2020, whatever. And if you listen to my update on the 10 predictions, after I recorded it, I thought about it and I was like, I didn't say anything about agents. And in some ways, I actually think that's probably okay. I think agents are still, yes, people are playing with them and implementing them, but it's still very early on the curve. So even if I had added it, I would have put it on my category 3 of like things to keep on your radar. But I think the average person's not really messing with them. So I wanted to do a deeper dive. So I spent some time digging into it. You can check it out. You can look up 2025 Microsoft Work Trend and Index, and you'll find this whole report. There were some things in particular that I wanted to focus on. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but there were some really interesting insights that pulled out of it that I think are things we should be conscious and aware of, because I think they're showing some misses that we're making as it comes to AI. Now, one of the ones was highlighted by this whole, you'll see this circle graph, and it talks about how is AI being used, or where are people leaning into this, or why are people looking to agents? Why are they looking forward to, and whether it's agents or just AI in general, I think sometimes people are using those synonymously. But one of the biggest things is 80% of the workforce feels they don't have time. Okay, 4 in 5 people are going, I don't have time to do my work. That's concerning in and of itself. When 80% of people are going, there are not enough hours in the day to, get the work done, that's problematic. But what it does, it now stack on top of this, over half of leaders, it was 53% or something like that, leaders said, we need more out of people. Okay, so 80% don't have time to do what they do. More than half of leaders are saying, well, we need people to do more. They need to be more productive. They need to be producing more. So, and this is what the report seems to highlight, which I think it's a logical conclusion. It's the wrong conclusion. The logical conclusion I see so many companies leaning into with this is, and that's where AI comes in. That's what agents do. People don't have enough time. We need to get more out of them. We bring AI into the mix, and ta-da, we have added productivity and added work that gets done. And when you looked at the numbers, that's what 82% of leaders thought. They said this is the solution. So 80% of people, too much, I don't have time. More than half of leaders go, we need more. 82% of leaders go, AI is the solution. All right, this is the line of thinking that's happening. And I understand where that comes from. We are in a culture, in an environment right now that is just like, go, 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 go. We just need to go faster. We need to do more. We need to run at a higher rate of speed. We need to accomplish. And it's like, okay, how do you know that though? And this is honestly one of the, whether you ever work with me, if you want, you can call me and I can come help with some of this stuff. Whether you do or not, one of the most important questions I always ask when I get brought into some of this stuff, Christopher, because I'm in these conversations, Christopher, we don't have enough time. We need to get more done. We think AI is the solution. How do we make that happen? My first question is always, how do you know you need to get more done? And I'll be honest, usually it's met with a little bit of a deer in headlights stare, like, is that really your question back to us? How can you even question that? And I always have to kind of like, I always end up like going, well, listen, I'm not saying you don't. I'm saying, how do you know? How do you know for sure that the things you're doing are adding value and you need to do more of them? And it does lead to these conversations of, I mean, usually I'll just tell you the process. Usually there's resistance, there's defensiveness, because of course people are like, how dare you challenge the idea that doing more of what we're doing isn't the right path? And usually I can, we can walk people back from that and just go, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, how do we know? How do we know the things we're doing are adding value? How do we know that if we do more of those things, we will add more value? How do we know if the effort that's required to do more of those things with what we have is actually going to net a return that's greater than the investment? How do we know we're not going to get to the other side and say, we've invested $10 million on AI and upskilling and all this other stuff, and now people are churning out more of the same crap they were before, and that gave us a 5% lift, which comes out to about $100,000 in added revenue, but we spent $10 million on it. How do you know that's not where you are? And as I start pushing through that, suddenly people start recognizing, oh, okay, you're not saying we don't do it. You're saying, let's just make sure we have a pulse on how do we know this? And what is often at the core of this is that they don't know. And that's almost always where we begin spending some time is, let's at least validate these things. Let's at least validate that, okay, if 4 out of 5 employees don't have enough time to get their work done, could we maybe solve that by getting rid of some of their work? And I know the initial reaction a lot of times is like, absolutely not. What everybody's doing is so important. But is it though? How do we know it's important? And oftentimes, some of the first exercises I can do can take that 80% down to 40%. Less than 30% of people are going, I don't have time. Because when you start working on the right things, suddenly people start realizing, hey, I have more capacity to get the right things done. I just didn't have capacity to get done all the noise on top of the right things. So taking the time to slow that down is actually really important. And I think this risk right here actually highlights a major risk in organizations. There is just this natural assumption that people don't have enough time and we need to get more done, so we need AI to do it. And I think that is going to result in a lot of companies spending a lot of money, a lot of time, and adding a lot more stress to people that is not going to net a return. I think it's going to net a loss. And so I would encourage everyone to slow down and not say, no, we're not going to, but actually say, hey, how do we check? How do we make sure? How do we look at what's actually being done and decide, is all of this actually critical? And not just based on gut feels or based on high level assumptions, but like, let's actually dig into it and make sure before we move forward so that you're investing in AI, investing in change in the right things, not just because it's a thing, because it's not free. That's the other thing. People think like, oh, we just implement AI and it's free. It's not free. Not only does the tech cost money, but the upskilling, the resources that go along with it, like all this stuff costs money and time and energy. And you just need to be surgical about it. You can't just carpet bomb this into an organization. I think something else that came out in the report that I think more companies just need to be open. And I think people are getting a sense of this. Yes, companies are saying they want to use a lot of resources for upskilling, but also a lot of effort is going to reduction in headcount. They're looking at how do we trim headcount? How do we get rid of people? Which I said this in a post this week it was 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago. Anyway, we got to be really careful about this. As we continue growing our workforce with AI, we forget we're funneling more and more of our dollars to an entity that is incapable of adding back into the economic system. And so, when we take money from people, whether that's by not giving them raises or bonuses or whatever, or eliminating employees and laying them off, so now they're unemployed, and channeling that money over to AI, we got to remember AI can't buy products. It's not interested in services. It doesn't have time for entertainment or leisure. And so it can't add back into the system. And so you're going to have people who just don't have money to even buy the products. And it's a slow erosion of our economic system, but it's one I'm seeing happen a lot, where at some point people aren't going to have money to buy this stuff. You're going to have all these fancy AI tools doing all this stuff, and nobody's going to be able to even purchase it or do anything with it. And it's going to pop at some point. I have a good friend who's an economist, and we were talking about this the other day. We're like, this AI bubble will pop because it's just eating up all of these resources and dollars. And I mean, just it's eating up everything, and it can't do anything for us. And we're going to feel that. Now, I think one of the things that was good from this report that I think we'll see is one of the things it did spend some time on is breaking down, how do we dial into the right human to agent ratio? Now, to be clear, I hope everybody at this point knows I don't oppose AI agents. I'm not opposed to AI. I actually think it's great. I think we should use it wisely. I think we need to use it surgically, which is why I really love this second point about dialing into the human agent ratio and making sure we understand, hey, if we're going to do agents, there can't be too few or it's a waste. You're going to invest all this time and energy spinning up agents, but there's not enough people to oversee what they're doing. A good example I have is of someone I know who's a developer, and their company has created all these agents just churning out code that's now going to the remaining developers to approve. And his queue of stuff to approve, it's too, he can't even keep up with it. So there's too many agents for the number of it's just spinning up too much stuff, and he can't tap into it. Now, on the flip side, there can be too few where it's like, well, this isn't even really helping. So we're in this state of like, what is the right number of agents? What should those agents be doing? I actually think this work is actually going to be really helpful because it's going to actually contribute to some of the deconstruction that needs to happen of work so that we can understand, hey, what needs to be done? How does it need to be done? When does it need to be done? So we can make sure we're doing it the right way. But I think we need to slow down and take the time to do that. My concern around the dialing the human agent ratio is I'm not seeing a lot of that. I'm just seeing we turned it on and we're trusting people to figure that out. And that's why I have the AI effectiveness rating, because we're handing over agent creation to people who many don't even know what that means. And that came out really clear in some of the data of like, do you even know what an agent is? And many people were like, no, I don't know what that is, or I couldn't describe it or figure out where it fits in. So we just got to be really careful with that. But I am excited and would encourage organizations that if you are exploring agents, take the time to understand where, when, how many you actually need and where they fit into the mix to get a better result. Again, it's this surgical, strategic thinking around the use of AI instead of, hey, great, agents can, people not enough time, need more productivity, therefore AI agents fix. That's a very caveman-esque approach to agental AI. Now, something related to that, though, was, if you jump to section 3, and then I'll go back to some of the things I think we're seeing with people with it, is, it went into like this idea of the mindset of people. Where are they at with agents and how do they feel about it? And you can see there is a pretty steep divide between leaders and employees. And I think that is actually a concerning gap that we need to close, because we have decision makers who have, and there's numbers are still pretty low, but they kind of have more comfort and familiarity with it. And they're the ones who are moving forward with some of this stuff. Their people really aren't even aware or, know how it works. And again, this puts you at risk of a person making a decision about how you're going to use AI who doesn't really understand your job. And so I think to leaders, I would say, make sure you're inviting your people in, you're bringing them along for this ride. You're not just buying the marketing hype that these things are going to be great and enough about it to tell your people where AI is going to fit or how many agents they need or what their agents are going to be doing. Invite your people along for the ride so that they understand it. We need to close this gap where 70% of leaders know what an agent is and 40% of employees do. That should be like neck and neck, and it should be higher, but it should be neck and neck. Some of these other things, just again, don't operate off assumptions. But then to the employees, now is a really good time to recognize AI does belong alongside you. It just belongs alongside you in the right ways. And you are the best person to figure out, hey, where are there things that are good for AI to take care of? And where are there things that you go, no, this would not be a good place for that, so that you can work with your boss, you can work with your leaders on how to do this well, so that you don't end up like my friend who found themselves suddenly discovering, oh, turns out my job is approving AI coding tickets. Great. That's not what I would have recommended as a path. Well, I told him a long time ago, you need to get in front of this and start showing people how, or at some point, this is what's going to happen. And so just be really, really conscious of that. I think it's this working together. Leaders, you're the ones who are in the ability to make the decisions. Employees, you're the ones who are close enough to know where and how and when to do it. And so you've got to team up and do this. Now, one of the big concerns that I saw with this, well, two that really stood out to me, was one metric in here was trusting AI for high stakes work. Okay, when I looked at one of the stats on here, 80% of leaders trust AI to do high stakes work. Now, that's really problematic when you consider the fact that leaders often don't understand the depth of the high stakes work, and they already trust it. And so that's concerning in and of itself. But then employees weren't that far behind. They were like 65%, 66 or something like that, 66. So even employees are at this point of, yeah, we can trust AI to do this high stakes work. This is extremely problematic when you compare it to the Apple research that says, when it comes to crisis situations, high levels of complexity, things like that, AI fails. It does not perform well. It sounds like it performs well. It's extremely confident in what it does, but it doesn't actually produce a good result. And so the fact already on the comfort curve, we have jumped up to, yeah, I'm pretty sure it'll do a great job. What? The data doesn't support that. The data says the opposite. I continue getting pulled into crisis situations where people have handed things over to AI only to have it blow up in their face. And so I was really concerned to see how high the trust level is in AI to do the high stakes, high complexity work. Now, I'm not ringing the alarm bell saying this is, doom and gloom, apocalypse is upon us. No, but I am saying we got to be a little more careful here because the data just does not support it. And I'll tie this to my next point about GPT-5. I think the other thing that was really interesting, though, in this, and then I'll probably wrap here, was, well, I got one more thing, was, going back to my original point, everybody said one of the biggest problems, 4 out of 5 people, 4.5 out of 5 people said they don't have enough time. There's not enough time in a day. When it came to saving 1 hour a day with AI, is AI giving you back an hour? Leaders were less than a third. Employees were at less than 20, or we're at 20%, 1 in 5. So I want to illustrate this point that people are going into AI because they go, we don't have enough time to do things, but we need to do more. So we're going to get AI to help. And what's coming out of this is AI is not helping us with our time situation. And then the data is showing it's not actually improving outcomes. Now, to be crystal clear, that's not me saying AI is, all hype, it's all smoke and mirrors, it's not actually capable. I think it's capable. I think what this data is revealing is how poor of a job we're doing with AI. I think that's the takeaway everybody can walk away from right now is report after report after report after report continues to show we're not doing a good job. So we need to do something different. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. We can't keep pursuing AI the way we are pursuing it and hope that at some point we're going to get to a model that magically picks up the pieces, that closes the gap, that at some point people are just going to magically be good with AI and it's all going to get fixed. We've got to think differently about it. We've got to slow down. We've got to deconstruct. We've got to figure out, hey, are we working on the right things? We've got to identify how capable are the people we're asking to use AI. That is why I have created the tools that I have to help organizations with this, because what we're doing right now is not working. And the technology is not going to fix that. And so whether you're an employee, whether you're a leader, whether you're a business owner, please hear that, because if we keep going down the path we're going to just make bigger and bigger and bigger messes that are harder and harder and harder to clean up. Okay. I am only going to get to the third, so I'm not going to get to the couples retreat one. I'll move that to another one. So let's talk about GPT-5. There's a whole lot of buzz, and thank you, David, for sending this to me. I've been kind of watching on the outskirts of my radar what was happening, and there's been a lot of talk, about when OpenAI was going to release GPT-5 and what does it all mean. And there's lots of talk about, are we at the singularity point? Just to be clear on what the singularity point is. The singularity point is once AI reaches a level that it's able to self-improve. And I've seen a lot of comparisons of this to a black hole, in that we don't really know what's on the other side of that. Once AI becomes truly autonomous and can self-improve itself and can, start to do work completely autonomously, what happens when we go through there? It's like going into a black hole. We've got some predictions on what we think might happen, but we really have no idea what happens to physics once we go through that. We're kind of in that same place with AI where everybody's wondering, are we almost there yet? And what happens when we get there? What happens when AI just takes off and starts doing its own thing? I think we've all seen enough Hollywood movies. It doesn't take much for us to speculate on the negatives, but that's not necessarily helpful. So I listened to the video you sent me, David, and I watched a bunch of other things around GPT-5.0, which they're predicting is going to come out in, July. And a lot of the stuff related to this is like everything AI. This will be the thing that's going to change the world as we know it. This is when, AI is going to take over the world or whatever. And the video was very hype driven, but it wasn't, this is the end of the world. It was very utopian versus dystopian. But what I think it misses is, I honestly think it misses what the data really says. And that's the thing. Everybody keeps thinking this next model release is just going to be so transformative that we're just not even going to know how to respond to it. I'm not seeing any of that. And I watched another video from somebody who was talking about how back in 2013, they were working with Waymo, I think was the company, autonomous vehicles. Back in 2013, this is almost 13 years ago. And they were, they took a Waymo ride and it worked really well. And they were in the car going, this is it. Like, this is the inflection point. This is when we go, this is the singularity of autonomous driving. At this point, nobody's ever going to drive again. And here we are 12 years later, and we really don't have autonomous cars because the complexity of what it really takes just isn't there. So my take on GPT-5, I'm not going to really say anything about what I think it's going to bring to market until it's actually released. I think there's just way too much hype about what it could be and what it might be able to do and what the benchmarks are saying. And I've said before, I think our current benchmarks are garbage. I just, at least in terms of tangible, what's it actually capable of? Can we show it's showing better technical capabilities than previous models? Sure. What does that mean in real life? Well, nobody knows because we haven't really applied it to anything. And we, in some ways, can't even seem to get AI to perform effectively in very basic use cases today. Going back to what I just said about the Microsoft thing, the problems we're running into right now are not technical in nature, most of them. There are some, but most of them are not technical in nature. And so I think there's a lot of pressure right now to say, once the LLMs or the LRMs reach a state that they can, do all this stuff, it's magically going to fix the problems. It's not. My prediction is it's not. We're still going to, if anything, the problems are just going to be amplified even louder, which is going to cause people to either completely pull back or they're going to make some really stupid decisions and it's going to blow up and make an even bigger mess than they planned. And so when I look at some of the things that they're predicting for GPT-5o, maybe it would be theoretically capable of doing some of these autonomous things. Maybe it'd be theoretically capable of redesigning and improving itself, but I don't think it's going to do it well. And I don't think people are anywhere near ready to actually do anything with it, even if it could. And so that's where I think I'm really curious to see what it's capable of and all this other stuff. But I just even look at some of the stuff like, AI video right now. It's making some major jumps and strides and leaps in terms of things. But I think about AI images. They were messy for a while and then all of a sudden they got better. And then now even still, it's kind of just leveled out into there's more AI images out there, but it's not really dramatically changing the world. And the same is happening with video. Right now video's in hype phase. And I think it's just going to kind of move into, there's more AI video injected into things. So do I think GPT-5o is going to be the world-ending event that many people say? No, but we'll see. Quite frankly, the other thing is anything that hits the consumer market, if it hits the consumer market and it's truly world-ending in terms of like, oh my gosh, AI can do all this now, then we're already in over our heads and we're in too deep. Because if it's hitting consumers and we reach that point, government agencies, big companies, like they're already neck deep in this stuff. And so if truly GPT-5 blows my mind the way everybody's saying it's going to, I'm probably going to be more concerned of like, oh boy, like what else is happening that we don't even know about yet if this is already coming to us as a consumer. As it stands today, I look at where things are and I'm like, the Apple research kind of shows we really have not fixed the complexity issue. We really don't know how to get AI to do things well and consistently and autonomously. Do I think GPT-5 is going to magically bring that? No. If anything, I look at what Altman and some of his, cronies, tech bros are doing, and I'm like, you guys are so lost in your own cognitive dissonance. I don't even think you see things clearly to be able to see. Do you even see what you're saying is the Singularity event? Like maybe in your own little world, but not to the rest of the world. And that's coming from somebody who's really watching closely, like how these things are coming together and what's the real potential of it. I think there are so many people who are so in their bubble of AI, they've lost touch with reality of what it actually takes for things to adopt and takes for things to change and takes for things to get integrated into the complexity of things. Is it possible GPT-5 could be amazing and a company that's starting from ground zero with absolutely no infrastructure, nothing in place, might be able to leapfrog and skyrocket past companies that have way more, under their belt? Yeah. And I think that could be extremely disruptive. But is it just going to wild scale scorch the earth? I really don't think so. And normally when I look into the people who, are saying it is, there's usually some angle behind why they're pushing for it or what they're really, they're playing on this hype. They're trying to do some of these things. So that's my take. We'll see. We'll see if it even releases here in July. I'll be curious if it does. And believe me, as soon as it does, I'll happily cover what some of the things are related to it. But I don't even think even after it releases, we're going to really know how capable it is until people have actually started putting it to work in some real use test cases. Because it's one thing for AI, and going back to my thing last week on AI and therapy, even in perfectly sanitized clinical environments, it's not performing great. You go put it in the messy real world where it's an absolute mess, and it's even worse. And so if anything, it's, I think, our overconfidence and our comfort. I mean, the fact like 80% of people already trust it with complex things, I think that's a bigger risk than the technical capabilities of GPT 5.0. Okay, with that, I hope you have a great week, a great weekend, and we will see you on the other side.